Hi friends, welcome back to my kitchen. If your property is anything like ours, it is covered in dandelions right now. I know a lot of people will spray to get rid of them, so their lawns look nice. We are definitely not about that. Dandelions are wonderful for the soil. The bees absolutely love them. I know last year when we got our bees, it was I think about mid-June. It was quite late, so there were not a whole lot of dandelions, but they are loving them this year, and every portion of the plant has a multitude of uses. So the root can be really wonderful for liver health. The leaves are considered a bitter green, so they can be really supportive for digestion, and the flowers have a multitude of uses as well. They are anti-inflammatory, so we are going to be using the flowers today to make a dandelion salve. Something you're going to want to consider when you're harvesting dandelions is that you're harvesting them somewhere that has not been sprayed. And then the first step in making this salve is going to be making an oil infusion. And to do that, we are going to need a whole bunch of dandelion flowers. How much you do just depends on how much you want to make, but I will have a full recipe down in the description box below. The first step in making the oil infusion is to dry the dandelion flowers. You have a couple options. You can use some sort of herb drying rack. In the past, I've used just a baking sheet with a cooling rack on top, or you could also dry them in the dehydrator on a very low setting. Once you have your flowers dried, the process is really simple. So you're just gonna add those dried flowers to a jar and top it off with oil of your choice. I typically use olive oil for this. And then you're going to want to let this infusion sit for at least 4 weeks before we move on to make the salve. So our first step in making the salve is going to be straining off the infused oil. So you're gonna want to let this sit for at least 4 weeks. And then I've just got a bowl with a metal strainer over top of it and a piece of cheesecloth. Now that we have our oil strained off, I'm just gonna measure out our beeswax. So I'll leave the recipe down in the description box below, but for how much of the oil infusion I have, I am gonna need about 1.25 ounces of beeswax. And to melt the beeswax, you're gonna wanna be careful with what you use because it's really difficult to get the beeswax out. So you could use a double boiler. I am just using a mason jar and I add this to a pot of water. I'll show you that here in a second, and just get this melted down. So I've just got a pot on medium-low heat here, and it has a couple inches of water in there, and I'm just gonna place the mason jar with the beeswax directly into the pot, and we are going to let that simmer until the beeswax is melted. If you're at all concerned with having the mason jar directly on the bottom of the pot, I'm not, since this is relatively low heat, but you could go ahead and place some sort of dishcloth or trivet at the bottom to make sure it's not sitting directly at the bottom of the pot. Now that that beeswax is melted, I've just gone ahead and turned off the element, and I'm gonna go ahead and add in our oil infusion. So since that oil infusion was quite a bit cooler than the beeswax, some of the beeswax did start to just solidify a little bit. So we're gonna let that sit here on the element for a few minutes, let it combine, let that last little bit of beeswax melt back down, and then we're gonna get this into some jars. So that is all there is to this. I'm just gonna go ahead and get this into some jars. At this point, you could go ahead and add in some essential oils if you wanted. You might just want to wait until the oil mixture and the beeswax has cooled down just a little bit. With the dandelion flowers being anti-inflammatory, this salve is really great for any aches and pains. It's also really good for any sort of skin conditions, so rashes, cuts and scrapes, that sort of thing. So as you can see, this is a super simple recipe that comes together really quickly. It would make a great gift if you want to think ahead for the holidays. But if your property is covered in dandelions like ours is, or maybe it's not, but you can go find somewhere secluded to harvest some, go ahead and do that. We have some dandelion infused apple cider vinegar going right now, and you could go ahead, harvest the dandelion leaves to make salads or pesto, or dry them to make a homemade greens powder, and dig up the roots to dehydrate and make a dandelion root tea for liver support. So there are tons of options. I will have some more options, ideas, and information down in the description box below if you're interested in checking that out, along with the recipe. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.